Okay, picture this for a second. You're lying in bed. It's like 11:40 at night. You should be asleep. But instead, you've got your phone 6 inches from your face and you're doing that thing, you know the thing, where you open your banking app, look at the number, close it, and then open it again 4 seconds later like it's somehow going to be different. And honestly, you're not even panicking. You're not broke. You've got a job. You're paying your bills. Maybe you've even got a little bit tucked away in a savings account. But there's this quiet, nagging feeling underneath all of it, this sort of low-grade hum that says, am I actually doing okay? Like, is this normal person financial progress, or am I just treading water and calling it swimming? If that feels a little too specific, a little too close to home, I get it. Honestly, that was me for a long time. My name is Rick, and I spend an unreasonable amount of my free time thinking about money. Not in a greedy, count your gold coins kind of way, but in a, why does this stuff feel so confusing when it's really just a handful of ideas stacked on top of each other kind of way. I got tired of the vague advice. Save more, invest early, don't buy the coffee. Cool, thanks, very helpful, very specific. What I actually wanted, what I think most people actually want, is a map, like actual checkpoints. Moments where you can look at your financial life and go, oh, I just crossed something real. And that's what today's about, because here's the thing nobody tells you. Personal finance isn't one long, flat road where you just sort of trudge forward forever. It's got stages, it's got milestones, and once you understand what they are, something kind of magical happens. The whole journey stops feeling like an endless grind and starts feeling like a game you can actually win, level by level. So, stick with me because by the end of this, you're going to know exactly where you stand, and more importantly, exactly what's next. Let's start with the one that feels the least exciting but honestly might be the most important, and that's building your emergency fund, what I like to call your financial seatbelt. Here's why I use that word. A seatbelt doesn't make your car faster. It doesn't help you get to work quicker or make your commute more fun. Nobody buys a car because of the seatbelt, but the one day something goes wrong, and something always eventually goes wrong, it's the only thing standing between a bad afternoon and a life-altering catastrophe. I think about a guy I used to work with. We'll just call him Dave, because there's always a Dave. Dave was doing everything right on paper. Decent job, contributing a little to his 401k, no credit card debt. But he had basically nothing in a separate cash cushion. It was all just sort of sitting checking to checking, month to month. And then his car's transmission gave out. Like, fully gave out. Needed replacing. $2,200 he didn't have sitting around. So what happened? He put it on a credit card at whatever eye-watering interest rate they were charging, and suddenly, this one bad afternoon turned into an 18-month financial hangover. That's the thing about not having a cushion. It doesn't just cost you the emergency itself. It costs you the interest, the stress, the sleepless nights, all of it compounding on top of the original problem. And the annoying part is, transmissions don't ask if it's a convenient month. Neither do layoffs. Neither, honestly, do medical bills. Life just sort of hands you the invoice whenever it feels like it. And your only real choice is whether you were prepared or not. So here's the breakdown. Real simple. You want somewhere between 3 and 6 months of essential expenses sitting in a boring, accessible savings account. Not invested, not growing aggressively, boring on purpose. Rent, groceries, utilities, minimum debt payments, add those up, multiply by 3 to 6, that's your target number. Why 3 to 6 and not like 1 month or 12 months? Because 1 month barely covers a surprise vet bill, and 12 months is often overkill that keeps money sitting idle when it could be working harder for you elsewhere. 3 to 6 is that sweet spot where you can survive a job loss, a medical thing, a surprise transmission, without unraveling your entire financial life. And look, I know building this feels slow. It feels like you're just parking money and watching paint dry while your friend is out there talking about some investment that's about to pop off. But this milestone isn't about excitement. It's about giving yourself permission to take financial risks later, because you know you've got a floor underneath you. You cannot build a tall building on a shaky foundation, and money is exactly the same. And honestly, there's a strange kind of confidence that shows up once this milestone is in place. Not arrogance, just this quiet steadiness. You stop flinching every time your phone buzzes with an unexpected charge. You stop that little stomach drop feeling when the mechanic says the word diagnostic. It's not that bad things stop happening. It's that bad things stop being catastrophic. All right, milestone number 2. And this one's got some emotional weight to it. Becoming free of high-interest, non-mortgage debt. I'm talking credit cards, personal loans, those buy now, pay later things that sneak up on you. Anything charging you double-digit interest just for the privilege of using money that isn't yours yet. Here's a metaphor I really like for this. Imagine you're trying to swim across a lake, and you've got this anchor tied around your ankle. Doesn't matter how strong your strokes are, how good your technique is, how much you're improving as a swimmer, that anchor is dragging you down the entire time. High-interest debt is that anchor. You can be investing, you can be saving, you can be doing everything right elsewhere. But if you've got a credit card balance compounding against you at, honestly, sometimes 20+%, you are swimming against a current that's stronger than almost anything you could reasonably earn on the other side. This is actually one of the places where the math gets kind of uncomfortable for people, because there's this instinct to say, well, I'll just invest instead of paying off debt, because investing feels productive and paying off debt feels boring. But when the debt is charging you more than you can reliably expect to earn investing, you're not being productive. You're basically paying to lose. So what's the actionable piece here? List every debt out, smallest to largest or highest interest rate to lowest. Pick whichever method keeps you motivated, because honestly, the best method is the one you'll actually stick with, and start attacking them with real intensity while making minimum payments on the rest. This is a stage, not a permanent identity. You're not bad with money because you have debt. You're just at an earlier checkpoint than someone who's already cleared it. Don't turn this into a story about your worth. Turn it into a project with a deadline. And here's a small personal aside. I used to feel almost ashamed talking about debt, like it revealed something embarrassing about my past choices. But honestly, almost everyone's got a chapter like this somewhere in their story. The shame doesn't pay off the balance any faster. Action does. One more thing on this. Watch out for the reward yourself trap. You pay off one card, and there's this little voice that goes, hey, you did so well, you deserve a treat. And sure, celebrate the win. Absolutely, you should. Just don't celebrate it by opening a new tab of debt disguised as a reward. I've seen people do this cycle for years without realizing it. Pay off, celebrate, reaccumulate, repeat. And never actually notice they're basically running on a treadmill, not a staircase. Now we get into the part that I actually think is the most psychologically brutal, and that's reaching your first significant net worth checkpoint. For a lot of people, that's the first $100,000 in invested assets. Why is this one so brutal? Because this is the stage where growth feels agonizingly slow. You're contributing consistently, you're doing the right things, and the number just crawls. It's mostly your own contributions dragging that total upward, because at this stage, the returns on your investments haven't built up enough mass to really contribute much on their own yet. Think of it like pushing a boulder up a hill versus a boulder rolling downhill on its own. Early on, you are the entire engine. Every dollar of progress is basically you, your discipline, your paycheck, your choice to invest instead of spend. It can feel thankless, honestly, like you're doing all this work and the results are barely visible. I remember when I first started really tracking this stuff, watching the number creep from 10,000 to 20 to 30, and it genuinely felt like nothing was happening. Slow, slow, slow. And then somewhere around that first 100,000 mark, something shifts. Not overnight, but noticeably. The base gets big enough that the returns start contributing meaningfully alongside your contributions, rather than your contributions doing basically all the heavy lifting. This is why so many people quit right before things get good. They hit the boring, grindy middle section and think it's never going to change, so they stop contributing, or they get distracted chasing something flashier. But this stage isn't a sign that something's broken. It's just physics. Mass has to build before momentum kicks in. The actionable takeaway here is almost annoyingly simple. Automate your contributions so that consistency doesn't depend on your motivation on any given Tuesday, and then basically ignore the number for stretches at a time. Check in monthly or quarterly, not daily, because if you're staring at it every single day during this slow crawl phase, you're going to talk yourself into quitting. I also want to say this gently, because I think it matters. Comparison is going to try to wreck you during this stage. You're going to see someone online who's supposedly further along, younger, faster, and it's going to feel unfair, but you genuinely have no idea what their starting point was, what help they got, what corners of their life are actually a mess behind the highlight reel. Run your own race. The boulder doesn't care what anyone else's boulder is doing. All right, this next one is honestly my favorite to talk about because it's the moment everything starts to feel different, and I call it the crossover point. Here's the concept in plain language. The crossover point is the moment when the growth your investments generate on their own, in a given year, starts to outpace the amount of new money you're personally adding. In other words, your money starts making more progress than you do. Let that sink in for a second because it's a genuinely strange feeling the first time you notice it. You put in, say, a certain amount over the course of a year through consistent contributions. And then you look at how much your total actually grew, and it's more than what you put in. The difference wasn't you. It was the portfolio itself, working quietly in the background while you were living your life, going to work, making dinner, arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. This is the part where compounding stops being a concept in a textbook and starts being something you can actually feel. It's the difference between pushing that boulder and watching it start to roll under its own weight. Once you cross this line, your relationship with saving and investing genuinely changes because you start to viscerally understand that the real engine of wealth isn't your paycheck anymore. It's time plus consistency plus patience, all working together. Now, I want to be careful here because this isn't some magic overnight flip. Markets go up, markets go down. Some years, the growth outpaces your contributions, and some years, it very much does not, especially early in a downturn. So don't measure this milestone off one single great year or one single bad year. Look at it as a multi-year trend, a general direction things are heading. The actionable advice for this stage is to keep your contribution habits steady no matter what the market's doing, because consistency is what got you here and consistency is what carries you through. And also, and this one's important, resist the urge to get cocky or complacent just because the growth feels effortless for a while. This stage rewards patience, not ego. And finally, milestone number 5, the one everything's actually been building toward, reaching what I call your enough number, the point where the income your assets generate is sufficient to cover your essential cost of living, whether or not you ever work another day. This is different for absolutely everyone, and that's actually the whole point. Your enough number isn't some universal figure you find on a chart online. It's deeply personal, based on your lifestyle, your location, your priorities, the life you actually want to live, rather than the life someone else is showing off on social media. I like to think of this milestone less as retirement in the traditional sense, and more as reaching a place of genuine optionality. It's not necessarily about quitting your job and disappearing to a beach somewhere. Some people get there and keep working anyway because they enjoy it. What changes is the why. You're no longer working because you have to pay rent next month. You're working because you want to, because it's meaningful, because it's fun. And that shift from obligation to choice is honestly one of the most freeing feelings a person can experience with their finances. Here's a small reflection. I think a lot of people assume this milestone is about accumulating some enormous, impressive pile of money. But really, it's about the relationship between two numbers, what your assets can reliably generate, and what your actual life costs to run. You can reach this milestone faster by growing the first number, sure, but you can also reach it faster by getting honest and intentional about the second one. Sometimes the fastest path to freedom isn't earning more, it's needing less and being genuinely at peace with that. The actionable step here is to actually calculate your real number, based on your real expenses, not some vague guess or a number you saw thrown around online. Get specific. Track your actual essential spending for a few months, project it forward, and let that be your lighthouse. Everything else, the saving, the investing, the debt payoff, all of it, is really just the boat carrying you toward that light. And one last thought on this milestone, because I think it gets overlooked. Reaching your enough number doesn't mean the goalposts have to stay frozen forever. Life changes, priorities shift. Maybe your enough grows a little because you want to travel more, or it shrinks because you realize you actually value simplicity over square footage. The number isn't a cage, it's more like a compass you get to keep recalibrating as you actually learn more about yourself along the way. So let's just zoom back out for a second, because it's easy to get lost in the details and forget the shape of the whole thing. You start by building your seatbelt, that emergency cushion that keeps one bad afternoon from turning into an 18-month spiral. Then you cut the anchor, clearing out the high-interest debt that's dragging against every other effort you're making. From there, you push through the slow, grindy climb to your first real net worth milestone. The stage where it's mostly just you and your discipline doing the heavy lifting. Then, if you stay consistent, you hit the crossover point, that strange and honestly kind of thrilling moment where your money starts outworking you. And finally, you arrive at your enough number, the place where your finances aren't a source of anxiety anymore, but a source of genuine choice. Here's what I want you to really sit with, though. None of these milestones are about the number itself. They're about what the number buys you back, and what it buys you back is peace. Fewer 3 a.m. phone staring sessions. Fewer moments of quiet dread when an unexpected bill shows up. More room to make decisions based on what you actually want, rather than what you're forced into by circumstance. And honestly, wherever you are right now in this list, even if you're just starting to build that first cushion, even if debt still feels like a mountain, that's okay. Genuinely. Every single person who's ever crossed that fifth milestone walked through the first 4 to get there. There's no shortcut that skips the boring middle part, but there is a path, and now you actually know what it looks like. So take one small step this week. Open that separate savings account, list out that debt, automate one more contribution. Whatever the next milestone is for you, just move a little closer to it. Because the version of you a few years from now, the one who's crossed a few more of these lines, they're going to be really glad you started today instead of waiting for some perfect moment that was never actually coming. Now, if you found this valuable, make sure to press that like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.